Alright, here's a shot of the whole engine. We'll go to the back here. That's the intercooler up top. You see the turbo up high in the back. The exhaust is simply a 90-degree out bend there. I'll try and crop in some video of it running for you. Basically, I started with a stock 1600. I don't really know the contents of it. It was rebuilt on this car when I got the car. I know it's got an Eagle 110 cam. I believe it's otherwise bone stock, and probably a cheap rebuild kit based on the other work done to the car. I took the factory end castings. It's a dual port, of course, 73. So took the factory end castings and I drilled them and insert some little bungs which are welded in. You can just make out there at the bottom of the injector, and stuck a set of injectors in. The fuel rails are mid-80s GM 3.3 V6 that just happen to have an injector spacing on them that was about right. This is hacked together. It's zip tied and safety wired in place, but I'm fabbing up an aluminum holder that'll stick out there and support that better. But for now, really, I've been running it for a while. I haven't had any trouble with it. Those are GM injectors out of a 3rd gen Camaro, like a TPI Camaro with a I think a 305. They're 19-pound injectors. I believe that's 305 and not 350, but it might be 350. I'm not sure. Got them from a buddy for nothing. Got the injector rail from a junkyard for a few bucks. You know, drilling and welding in this stuff in the manifold was cheap. I just used aluminum piping that happened to have about the right ID. I drilled it out a little bit to make the ID correct for the injector O-rings, and just drilled a big hole in them on the drill press and stuck the pipe in there and welded it up. My fuel system, well, we'll talk about that later. For now, I've got a Baja, like a basic Quiet Pack Baja header that I already had on the car. I just cut it off right there at the collector and welded a piece of 2.5-inch exhaust pipe up, hammered it a little bit square at the top, plasmed out a turbo flange by hand and stuck it on there. This is a T3 turbo from a Saab 9000, I believe it is. It's a 42 intake or compressor trim and a 48 exhaust trim. Smallest one I could find. And the Saabs use a standard format turbo that has just a band or a clamped inlet here, a clamped outlet on the turbine. Has a standard T3 outlet that I took off the Saab. It was a big casting from here on down. I just cut it off and welded this 409 stainless 90 onto here, and a bung in there for the wideband O2 sensor. Let's see. The inlet flange for the Saab is standard T3 stuff. It's not like the Chrysler stuff. It's special. I had to reclock the turbo, and in order to do so, if you can see in there, I fabbed this new wastegate mount. There were some posts on a forum about that. The factory one's got like an angle in it, and it doesn't really work if you reclock. So I reclocked it and just fabbed a flat mount and hooked it up, and it's working quite well. The throttle body, it's not throttle body injected, it's port injected, but the air door, so to speak, is off of a GM 3.3 liter V6. I believe it was an 85 Pontiac something or another. It was, you know, practically free at the junkyard, but it has a GM idle air controller, and it has a throttle position sensor built into it. I also nabbed the throttle cable, and I'll show you how I fix that up in a minute. But it's got a 2-bolt flange on the bottom of this one, which is kind of weird. A lot of them have 4 bolts. And what I did, if you can barely make out under there, let's see if I can get a better angle. What I did here was you're looking up, you can see the bottom of the factory Beetle intake manifold right here. And the Beetle carb would normally bolt on right here, and I made an adapter. I took some, like, basically just 1/8-inch steel, and I made a flange that fits the Beetle manifold, put in a piece of tubing that I had laying around, and made a flange at the top that fits the bottom of that 3.3 liter GM throttle body, and just bolted it in with some silicone instead of gaskets. So I have this factory Beetle dual port manifold in there still. This has worked pretty well. I could probably get more performance out of something else, but you know, I was just trying to put something together cheap, and it's working well. While we're under here, let's talk turbo oiling, okay? I just stuck a plumbing tee on there. I used 1/8-inch pipe thread, which is a little different than the metric thread, but it seals up. I've got a line. The line coming straight at us there is the oil feed line to the turbocharger. That's the factory oil pressure sender right there on the end of the T. Works well. Comes on up here. I did have problems. I did have some problem with too much oil, and it blew seals in the turbo, despite the fact that I rebuilt it on eBay, or I rebuilt it using an eBay rebuild kit. So I had to put a restrictor. What I did was right in here, I have basically a jet, a little piece of brass, and I jammed it in the hose. It won't go down this hard line, so it's just big enough so it won't go down the hard line, but I drilled a hole in it that I got the size off the internet. I believe it was a 30 thousandths hole. It might have been 60. I'm not sure. I forget. It's been a year or so since I did this, but I believe it was 30 thousandths. So that it metered oil up here to the turbo. I'm not sure. Like I said, I've been running it around for quite a while like that, and it's been fine. I do have a little slop in the turbo bearings. I don't know if that's because I got a $30 rebuild kit or off of eBay, or if that's just because I don't have enough oil up here, but that was the size that a lot of guys with T3 seem to need, so I ran it. The outlet, these hard lines, by the way, are just stuff that was on that Saab that I got the turbo from, and I just I cut and bent things a little bit and got it to work. This hard line down here is the same story. It's got a flange on it. I cut it here and welded it back together so it pointed the right direction, but it's just a kind of a 45 maybe. I put some oil hose on the end of it there, and then I fabbed up a it's hard to see here, but you see the line running right there. Fabbed up a flange that bolts to the fuel pump, original fuel pump mount there, which I don't need because I'm fuel injected now, and clamped that hose onto it. So that oil drain just goes right into the fuel pump hole there.